Hello and welcome to the Product Breakfast Club podcast by AJ&Smart, where each episode we bring you a fresh and insightful chat between designer and co-founder of AJ&Smart, Jonathan Courtney, and Jake Knapp, the New York Times best-selling author of design process book Sprint. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Jake has set it so that John gets a little electric shock each time you do. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to like, share or comment. We love hearing your feedback.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Woo.
Hey, everyone.
Episode
hey, everybody out there.
Episode 4 already. I mean, you know, it's actually crazy. How do we get to episode 4 already? Thought we were going to just
Seems
do
like it was
one.
just episode 3, and now it's 4.
This is we're back to the normal Product Breakfast Club consistency, or maybe constellation is the best thing to say, where it's nighttime here in Berlin and it's morning time with Jake.
It's morning. I have to block out the blinds behind me because it's so sunny here in California. How is it in Berlin? Is it pretty nice there?
You see, I mean, if you're on YouTube, you can see behind me here the blackness. It's been like this since about 2 p.m. So it's not really. I can't really talk about the weather here. It's.
You don't even know. It's just black.
No, it's just black. It could be really sunny. Maybe it's like really. I don't know. It's. I mean, I actually like it. I have no problem with this. Like, some people get really worked up about the weather being bad. They're like, "Oh, I need to get out of here in the winter. Or I start feeling sad." But I find it cozy. But I'm also from Ireland, so I spent 20 years in the darkness. So I don't really want.
Yeah, Ireland's even further north, if my geography serves. Is that right?
I don't know. No, it's very similar. It's very similar. Okay. It's on a very similar latitude. Is latitude the right word? Maybe. No, latitude.
Let's say it is. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Platitude. It's at the same. It's at the same vertical on the same horizontal on the globe. When you have a globe, turn it around. Same horizontal. Welcome to the Product Breakfast Club podcast, the podcast about product, process, and globes. So, I mean, it was actually a crazy last 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. We were in the same place doing a workshop here in San Francisco, doing Product Breakfast Club podcasts. And then I've done another workshop in Austin, and now back home for Thanksgiving, which would sound really old to the people who are listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, what is Thanksgiving for all the European listeners? I didn't know it was Thanksgiving, which is why I apologized when we started. Something about turkeys.
Yeah, it's the one day of the year when, as Americans, we're grateful for what we have, and then the rest of the year we just try to take things from other people.
Okay, that's fair enough. Enough. I can understand that. That's fair.
It's balance. It's
cool.
all about balance.
Yeah, here it's just Thursday. That's what we call it here in Berlin. Thursday, just hanging out. Yeah, it was really cool last 2 weeks, actually. I mean, there was a lot of things happen. I don't really even know how much we can talk about it because of NDA stuff, but the workshop was really great. I mean, it was like a 2-day design sprint bootcamp. We had some really, really cool companies there. It was definitely like a career highlight for me. For you, it's probably just like whatever.
Yeah, it was just an off day for me. No, it was amazing. We had super cool companies there. We had like Slack and Medium and Airbnb and Netflix and all kinds of cool companies. We're probably gonna have to bleep all that out.
No.
I don't know if we're allowed to say their names.
Well, I think we are. I think it's fine.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, and so it's fun to see that people are doing design sprints and they want to know more about it. So it was cool, and we had really good food and coffee. It was a fun time.
I didn't like it. No, it was really, really great. It was a really great week. Are we allowed to mention where we were on Wednesday? Who we met on Wednesday? Maybe not. Maybe.
Who did you meet on Wednesday? I can't remember.
We went to a particular well-known design agency, and
oh yeah, well yeah, of course we can say that. Yeah, we were at IDEO. Yeah, we were at IDEO hanging out, and Tim Brown came by. Timmy Brown.
I actually almost said
cool
Tim
guy.
Cook. Tim Cook came by. I was super. He looks really different in person, this Tim Cook guy. I got him to sign my iPhone.
He was really confused. He was like, why this doesn't make sense? Yeah. But I'll do it. But we got to go to, we went by IDEO and we talked about running a design agency, which I don't know anything about, but you do. And of course, Tim does, because he's run IDEO for a long time and really built up the brand over the years. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you met Kevin Rose. I don't know if you were allowed to say that either, but
the K-Man.
I don't know why we think people were like listening to this podcast.
As if anyone's going to listen to this fucking thing. Exactly.
Like no one's listening.
I also met the Pope.
Also that they're listening and they're like, oh wait, they said my name.
They said my name.
Kevin Rose is just listening to every podcast to make sure that he's authorized all the mentions.
Exactly. Kevin listens to every. Yeah. He's just got nothing to do. He's just relaxing. I don't know what he actually does. Just listens to podcasts. Just listen to our podcast. I mean, everybody we meet listens to this, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I have to assume everyone will be listening to it.
100%. I mean, it's great.
I think people we haven't even obviously released it because we're just doing the first episodes.
Yeah.
People are probably hacking in to your servers because you have servers, right? They're hacking right in there.
100%.
Taking the raw files, editing them themselves so they can get early access.
Yeah.
It's all over the globe.
This podcast it has gone viral, actually. If you're listening to this episode 4, we still haven't released the podcast, but it has gone viral. So, I don't know how that even happened. People are making the artwork for it. They're putting it on, however you put it on the iTunes. We don't even know how to do that yet. But
I don't even know. They figured it out for us. It's amazing. Yeah. It's so amazing.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah, and also, if you're listening to this and you're still like, hey, you promised me in episode 1 that the audio quality was going to get better.
Is it really gonna? It is.
Really?
At some point. We will get better.
Yeah. I'm going to get, Jake's going to get a new mic. I'm going to get a spit guard here because I keep spitting on everything. We're going to get different software. Who knows what we're going to do? But first of all, the most important thing is that we're getting started, and that's kind of like
That's right.
Exactly.
That's the way. That's the thing. We're getting started, and we're it's 90% of the way to a real podcast. So it's
people talking.
Ready to go.
Yeah,
to try it out. People talking.
People talking, and I have topics. I have topics to talk about today.
Oh, that's good. Besides name dropping, we've done so far name dropping round.
I have one more name drop. I didn't even think about it. If we're doing a name dropping round, Also, next week you're going to be speaking at Google's first Design Spring conference, and some AJ and Smarties are going to be there too.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to have 2 folks from AJ and Smart there speaking, kind of like taking over every panel, I think, at the conference. But yeah, it's pretty cool. There's going to be they're having a design sprint conference, which is exciting. I think.
You think
people want to talk about it? Yeah, I think so.
It's interesting.
I can never tell anymore if I'm excited. I'm so excited all the time that I just have to imagine what it would be like for someone who wasn't, if they would be excited now.
I can teach you,
as you can tell, I'm extremely excited.
Why aren't you eating breakfast? By the way, that's the kind of premise of the podcast, right?
It took us so long to figure out what height the microphone should be at.
I know.
It's almost lunchtime now.
I think you actually need to lower it one more, by the way. I would recommend one more lowering. So while you're lowering your microphone, I'm gonna kick right into the first and maybe only topic, because I know how long we tend to ramble. And this is a topic that we have both discussed a lot of times, but I don't think we've ever kind of. Oh, by the way, I have to say, and this is why these topics go on for so long, because now I'm on another tangent. I had to listen back to the first 3 episodes to check out if they were actually worth publishing, and I assumed they actually wouldn't be, but they were. And one thing I realized is all the different little annoying speech things that I do. And that's the worst thing about listening. The worst and best thing about doing a podcast, I think, is that you're like, oh my God, why do I keep saying that? And I'll tell you, I keep saying kind of, and now I notice when I say it. And even though I do these YouTube videos all the time, I guess my editors actually take that out. And so I'm, oh yeah, I'm really eloquent. And then I hear the podcast unedited, and it's like kind of.
On YouTube, you're just like Max Headroom. You're just like but iPod
Exactly.
1994, and it's all kind of smoothed out with all the kind ofs removed.
Exactly.
It's jerky.
It sounds so good. It sounds so good on
Yeah.
YouTube. I just didn't realize that I was such a bad public speaker. I mean, I also hear myself at these conferences and things, and it's just, I don't know. But at the conferences,
I haven't noticed, but now that you mention it, I'll start keeping a log of all the annoying things that you do.
I kind of noticed. Actually, one thing I want to say, just relating to the Google conference next week, there's a huge difference between speaking in the US and speaking in Europe, by the way. I think we
say more about that.
It's just all to do with the swearing. In Europe, because I think there's just so many different languages, and because I'm Irish, and because D is Australian, and like there's so many people from different countries at AJ&Smart, and a lot of countries are very sweary, especially Ireland and England and Australia. We use words that you guys consider to be like insanely bad. Like there's a word with the letter C that we use all the time, like as almost like, hey, you're such a that word. And as a friend,
you mean
you're
crisps
such a crisp.
instead of potato
You're such
chips?
a crisp.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh God, I can barely.
And we use it as a term of endearment. Like I would call my co-founder, you're such a crisps. And I would call like even my wife, I would say, yeah, you're such a crisps. She would say it back to me, crisps. Yeah. But in the US, it's like you have to be a little bit careful about what you say, because people are they're sensitive to that sort of thing. It's like
we're gentle. We're gentle folk.
Yeah.
You come over here with your crisps and your shoots and your darns, and we're just like,
yeah.
I don't know if this is a safe place.
It's tricky. You guys love the safety. It's very different over here in Europe. I told you a little bit about Berghain. I'm not going to go into it. Anyone listening who knows what Berghain is knows what I'm talking about, but this would never happen in the US. It's just
this would never happen. This is
everyone
not okay.
Everyone would get arrested, and it would be like front page of whatever newspaper you have the day it opens. Like it's just a lot of Germany's weird. I mean, in a good way, but I think I'm getting better, but I have a feeling there's going to be some swearing happening on stage at the Google event coming from AJ&Smart members, which are actually I'm going to warn them because I've had to tone it down. Like I've really toned it down. Also for the podcast, because I know a lot of people from the US will listen. A lot of one person. Okay, now I'm going to go into the topic.
I think actually you did a really good job at the workshop though. It was 2 days, and I thought you dropped like maybe one swear
F-bomb,
the whole time. So that was pretty good. I can't remember what it was, but it was low. It was a low figure of those. So that's impressive. I mean, really, I think it's okay. I think people are okay with it, Yeah. But the line is definitely different. The line is not in the same place.
You know what I think it is, and I think, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but in the US, when I'm one-on-one with somebody and talking to somebody and I'm swearing, they'll get sweary, right? They'll just let it rip. But I think everyone's concerned about the group. Everyone's concerned about looking bad in the group or seeming like you're okay with swearing. So when I speak at companies in the US, at the very start of my US career, people would come up to me at the end and say, hey, that was really great. And yeah, but maybe next time you could tone down the swearing. And I'm like, I didn't even swear. What are you talking about? That word is a swear word for you guys? Okay, fair enough. So, and it's funny because every so often in our workshop last week, I would stop mid-sentence really aggressively and change the word I'm going to say, because I was just about to say, on the podcast, I can say fuck, but immediately
I could see you. I could, you would be like, yeah, so up next, when you get and you would just like try to hold it back and then like kind of
want to squeeze it out,
recoil.
Yeah.
And then you would say the prototype, and it was
exactly
it was sort of weird, but
for the paid event, I held it back. For the free, I did a free workshop on Wednesday night at WeWork in Soho. I was just like spitting out all the backed up fucks that I was holding back.
It all came out.
Yeah. And everyone was like, help me. People were just walking it. No, they weren't. I think they don't care if it's free. All right. So let's just actually jump into a topic then. I think that people, I don't know if they're listening to this podcast for product kind of talk, or if it's just like random ramblings. Let's maybe do some product. So I have a little subject to kick us off, a little topic to kick us off. And when you see me looking over here, unfortunately, that's the bad thing about it being a YouTube ready podcast, is that you can see me doing stuff. I've got like so much material around me right now. It's just ridiculous. But when I'm looking over here, it's because I'm looking at my notes. And the topic, or at least the thing I want to talk about, is this tension between creativity in a design process or in a design team or in a company or whatever, just the topic of creativity, and how that differs from structure and routine, and how there is this like tension. And maybe I can kind of, let's say, kick it off with a little anecdote, which you like anecdotes, don't you?
I do. Love them.
Exactly. So, I mean, for me, at least now, like when I started AJ&Smart, or when I started in the design world 9 years ago, when I was a little boy, I was really all for, this like open creativity, and I didn't want anything to block me. And I really did not enjoy companies imposing processes on me at all, because I was kind of a bit rebellious. But as I started to grow the company, as I started to grow these teams and started to figure out how teams worked, I realized that you do need some structure, right? I think that you do need some basic processes to hold things together. And one really great story, or one really great example, I was chatting to one of the guys from GE who was at the workshop last week. Name drop.
Name drop, nice.
Name drop. David OMalley, actually. He's a great guy. But I was chatting to him about this, and he was like, there's a great experiment. You go into a big field. Of course, he's Irish as well, so it's always related to fields. You go into a big field, you put some kids there. I don't know why you have the kids in the first place, by the way. Let's just ignore that. You put some kids in the middle of the field, wide open field, and you watch what they're doing, right? And basically, this wouldn't work in America. Everyone would just arrest you immediately. So you watch what they're doing, and they just kind of walk around, but they don't go very far from the center point.
But you literally do this? This
no,
is not
you don't
like
have to literally do this.
You literally get a field and you get kids and put them in there.
I think that this is not something you should do, but it's an experiment that happened. It's an experiment that happened. It's an experiment that happened.
In Ireland, where they don't have laws. Okay, continue.
I don't know if they did it in Ireland or not. I don't really know what happened. I don't know what this David guy was telling. No, but it's a really great example. So you put I think they were kids anyway. You put them in the field and you just let them roam free, right? And what happens is they tend to not really go very far. They tend to kind of stick within the middle, like in the middle of the field, essentially, and they don't go very far from the center point. Now, you put a fence. Different kids. Let's get some different kids. Get rid of these ones. Now let's put some different kids in the field. But we put a really wide fence around them. This was way less creepy when he explained it to me. Now I'm really. Now you put a fence around these kids, and they actually walk to the edges of their boundary that has been created. They use a lot more of the space, and they play in a lot more of the space. And the point is that having some sort of structure and having some sort of limitations allows you sometimes more freedom than you would give yourself if it was completely open. Get it?
I get it.
Right. Perfect.
Get it. Yeah.
Okay. So in this way, and another book I was reading at the moment is this Discipline Equals Freedom handbook, which I was showing you. This big, scary crazy black book here. And I think that I really do believe personally that having some form of discipline, some form of routine within product teams or within creative processes, it doesn't have to be product teams. It could be graphic design or brand or whatever, or just writing a book. I really do think that it gives you the freedom to focus on what the challenges are, what the problems are, and you're not thinking the whole time about where the boundaries are and what the process is, right? So that I agree with. I'm 100% on board with that, and that's the baseline. However, now this is where the tension comes in. Last week when I got back from San Francisco, or this week when I got back from San Francisco, it was the first sprint that I'd done that I'd taken part of in a long time, where I felt like I had kind of maybe depleted my creativity, or somehow I just felt really. It was for a really cool brand that I really was excited of working with, and I was just assuming, like every other sprint, that I would just jump into it, and the structure of the sprint process would help me to, pop out ideas like it always does. Now, the end of the story is that it actually all worked out because we had so many people in the room and we were able to bring these ideas together and it worked great. But I felt
but your idea sucked.
But my idea sucked. Really, I really think that this week especially of all the weeks, I really felt like this was a bad week. This happens sometimes, but I also feel like what it made me think and what it made me think about for the company of AJ&Smart when we're doing these sprints all the time is maybe we do need to introduce, now that we've gotten so cold and so logical about building products, maybe we do need to introduce some form of open creativity or, some way to, let's say, and here's another book I've been reading, which has been The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And she talks about this idea of
different vibe.
A much different vibe.
Book you previously put up there.
Way less dark. But what I really like, she talks about this filling the well, like this filling the creativity well, having like this well of things to pull from, of inspiration to pull from. And it's like a process you go through every week. And it just got me thinking, like, there is this definitely a tension between creativity and structure. I often think that structure is the best way to go, and it kind of produces creativity. But I don't know, man. I felt it last week. I was like, what have I done here? Why isn't this a good idea? I wasn't happy about it. What came out was great, but it definitely wasn't because of me.
Yeah, no, there's a limit to what you can, in my opinion, to what you can accomplish with pure structure. And that seems, it feels funny for me to say that, because so much of my time over the last few years has been trying to insist on people that structure would set them free, because it does. Structure does help you. In most cases, that's what people need. They need the fence around the field so that they can get started and start playing and not huddle in the middle thinking like, when is the Demogorgon going to come out of the woods?
Classic.
The fence is going to keep you safe. But I just started watching Stranger Things. That's why the reference now in 2017.
Yeah, you're very far behind.
Everybody watched that a while ago. Yeah. But I think that the thing that, like, one thing that struck me recently is, you mentioned we visited IDEO, and I think that's a group of folks who have really been, intentionally thinking a lot about creativity over a long period of time, and have developed this sort of culture of creativity. And I don't know if you felt it, but I feel it like when I go in the building there. And it sounded to me often like from the outside, I wondered with IDEO, like how much of that was sort of this brand or this story that they had crafted versus like, was it reality? And I really actually think it is reality. Of having been exposed to it a bit more, you go in there and you're like, wow, like they have some kind of special thing. And they I know are thinking a lot about the processes that you do to refill the bucket and to draw inspiration. And I think what's challenging for somebody starting out in design is that you are starting off building products or starting off writing, being an artist, whatever, is that you want to know what the right way to do it is. And I think that we often like over optimize on creativity, over optimize on like, let's make sure we evaluate everything, and let's make sure we don't constrain this process. And this idea that we're not going to constrain it so that we can do the perfect artistic thing, I actually think that's much more common. And that's why you and I, like, with this idea of doing design sprints, of putting structure around it, is really helpful and liberating in most cases. But if you go too far in the direction of structure, then at a certain point you do need just some inspiration, which is, actually, that's why I'm watching Stranger Things. After I finish this book I'm working on right now, I have this idea for a science fiction book, and I need some I need some inspiration. I need to fill up that well. And so I'm, trying to take more time where I do nothing, and take time where I watch TV shows, which normally, like, I intentionally think like watching TV is not a good use of time. It just like sucks your free time away from doing other things. But I'm trying to like carefully make room for the kinds of things I wouldn't normally do to try to spark some of that stuff and try to make room for my mind to wander. And it is important, but I think that people shouldn't start by optimizing there, because I think that's where a lot of people lean. But maybe some people are more like more rigid and processy from the start. I just felt like I had to work to get there.
I don't know any company that is very rigid and processy from the start. I think that it definitely leans towards the creativity side. And most companies that I help out, their problem is that they have so much inspiration that they have no idea how to start something, or how to translate that inspiration into a product. And I think that I lean very, very heavy on the cold logical side of building products, but I also do 100%. I had the same feeling when I walked into IDEO, by the way. I really secretly wanted to hate it. I wanted it to suck. Because of course IDEO are, another design agency that you could book.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, that's like a thing. Because I felt like I've been trying to establish myself, my own identity as a designer. And I kind of wanted to go to IDEO and be like, oh, good, I'm actually better than them or something.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
selfishly, that's like, I think this feeling that you have inside yourself. And then you go and you're like, oh no, they're really cool and smart. And like, they do great work. And look how fun it is here. And look how much like they're throwing their heart into what they're doing. And it's pretty cool. It's also impressive because they've maintained that culture for a really long time, which I don't think is easy to do.
No, I really hate that I learned from them. I really dislike. I dislike that it was such a nice meeting. I was hoping Tim Brown would just come in and punch me, and I would be like, I knew IDEO sucked. I knew it. No, but it was really, really cool, and I definitely got. I've been to IDEO workshops a long time ago, but of course, obviously, this was them kind of doing workshops off-site. Or at conferences, and I always really liked them, and I always got a lot of inspiration from them. But of course, that's the surface level things, right? You're just seeing here's what design thinking is, and here's again what design thinking is. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But then I went into their office, and I was like, fuck, okay, these guys really know what they're doing, and this is a company that it has like harnessed creativity and turned it into a business. It's very impressive.
One thing that I think is interesting about them is how good they are at telling their story and talking about what they do. And, they're well known because of that. And sometimes I think it's easy to become skeptical of people who are really good at telling their story. And, is the story the same on the inside as it is on the outside? And I think for IDEO, it is. And when you go in, you see like, oh, this is the same thing that they do. It's not an act. This is actually honesty. This is what comes through is honest, and they're also good at crafting it and making it clear. Yeah. And that's kind of an interesting thing, because I think there are, there are probably a lot of companies that we wonder like how real, how honest are they being in the way they talk about what they're doing and what they're up to. We're sort of trained to be skeptical of the intent of companies, and these guys are cool.
I'm still skeptical because I don't want to like them. No, it was really great. Maybe we can get Tim Cook on the show at some point. I just keep calling him Tim Cook. So Mr. Cook, not even Tim, just Mr. Cook, like 100% wrong. I actually found the idea that you're watching Stranger Things as a way to fill up the well. It's obviously, I could mock you about the fact that you're just kind of making some bullshit excuse for watching Netflix, like everyone else when they're binging on Netflix, they're,
and that's clearly what it is. I mean, it is definitely an excuse to do it. But I also can feel that like it does. Yeah. I think that watching. So I'm writing a book about with my friend about my real friend, not you, with my friend about making time for things that are important to you, right? And it's one of the things that as I was working on the book, I was researching how much time people spend watching TV per day around the world, and it's crazy. It's like 4.5 hours a day in the United States on average, but it's not that much less in Europe. A lot of countries are. I think the UK is, I want to say like 3.5 or more. It's hard to find. Maybe like Sweden was in the like 2.5, but like most countries are over 3 hours per day. 3 hours per day. It's so much time. There's so much you could do with even part of that time. So I'm always really, really, really like have gotten careful of watching TV, because I found that when I stopped watching TV regularly in the evenings, I had time to write instead. And so if I've written anything, it's because I stopped doing that, and that started to like clear up some time and mental energy. Because if you're always absorbing other people's ideas, there's no room for your own ideas. You can't do that all the time. There has to be room for you to just be quiet, be bored, and create things. But below a certain threshold, I think you stop gaining benefits from the quiet and from being in your own head. Yeah. And it started to be really useful to actually see what other people are doing again, and be up to date on it. And yeah, and it is a great excuse to watch it.
No, but honestly, one of the products that I worked on this year that I'm most happy with, a large part of the concept came from playing a game called Titanfall. You obviously don't know what Titanfall is because you don't know like popular culture, but it's a very cool. It was a very cool. You've heard about Half-Life, right?
I have heard that, yeah.
So it was very famous for kind of changing the rules of how games worked narratively. And this game, Titanfall 2, came out, and it was very essentially it's a first-person shooter where you have a giant robot that you can get inside of. And a lot of how it worked in terms of the story, the kind of mixture of platforming and shooting, and how it all worked with the achievements that you could unlock within that game. It was just floating around in my head once I started working on this new product, and it suddenly came back to me during one of the exercises, and I was just like, oh my God, that's like a perfect match for what we're trying to solve here. They already solved it in this video game. And I think that's for me, I actually have to force myself to play video games, which is a weird thing to say. I procrastinate on playing video games. It's easier for me to just watch crap on YouTube than load up my PlayStation or Nintendo. But I'm forcing myself to do it. Now, I actually forced myself. This sounds so weird and sad. I forced myself to finish the new Mario game. I loved it. I really, really loved it. But it takes me so long to get up the courage and to get rid of the procrastination to just turn it on and actually start playing. But once I do, I end up taking a lot of the mechanics and the inspiration back into the product work. And I think probably one of the reasons I was so drained for this sprint this week is that rather than taking in a lot of new information, because we were doing so many workshops, it was just like we were dumping information the entire 2 weeks, and obviously loads of traveling and obviously jet lag and everything. Still no excuse. But I'm wondering now, and what I've been thinking about today is how to, within the structure of AJ&Smart, how to somehow build in this inspiration sharing, which is not just on the level of obviously every company does, which is like we post stuff on Slack and everyone can look at it, or we have like a once a month town hall where we tell you cool stuff. I'm wondering if there's like a way that we can build it into the culture of AJ&Smart that somehow you discover cool shit and you kind of are inspired by it. Help me.
One thing, I mean, I don't have the answer to that, although I can certainly riff real time, which is the antithesis of the sprint process, just brainstorm live. But what I do think actually is that, and this is kind of veers off of like podcast territory and into like giving you like candid feedback about the way you run your company. You guys run too many sprints.
Yeah.
You run too many, and they're actually, you can't run a sprint every week or almost every week and not wear down that creative part. Oh, and here comes, I think Flynn is coming in.
Hello.
It's Holly.
Hi, Holly.
Oh, thank you.
You're famous now, Holly. Your voice is famous anyway.
Oh, that is lovely. Holly has brought me a coffee.
My wife has brought me nothing. But shame. No, she's great. Sorry, go on. You were insulting my running of the business.
I was insulting you. Yeah. You can't. I mean, yeah. So I know I was talking to some of your colleagues about your sprint schedule because we were at the workshop and they were talking about how many sprints have you all done since you started doing sprints, or in the last 6 months, let's say, or last year.
One thing you have to consider is that
no, not considering it. I don't want to hear any disclaimers.
We run 2 sprints per week in parallel every week, and there are 2 product teams as well. So we do try to give. I mean, the way we're trying to solve that now is that we have a rotation system where people are rotated off the product team every 3 weeks, and they have like 1 week to themselves. But yeah, it's still the week itself. We're not sure exactly how that week is working. And as you know, with someone like Dee, we rotate her off a sprint and then send her to San Francisco to run a big workshop.
Yeah, right.
So it's not really, we know that everybody's in quite a reactive state right now at AJ&Smart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys you're in startup mode. You know, you are a startup and growing super fast and trying to get a handle on it. And in my experience, and it's not like I'm like have like a bazillion years of doing the same thing, but just because the design sprint is pretty new. But when I started doing it at Google, and it didn't have it hadn't quite caught on, and I was really still trying to convince people, hey, give this thing a shot. I was probably doing it maybe once a month and then twice a month. And so over the course of maybe a year and a half, I did 25 of them. And then when I went to Google Ventures and we really started to find out, okay, now I know how to explain it. Companies get it. We were doing collectively 35, 40 a year for 2 or 3 years. And you definitely hit this point where you just had to dial back because it's so hard to get into a new problem every week or 2 weeks. If you do 3 a month, I think it's too much to be sustainable. It's okay for a couple of years maybe, but it's hard. And so I think the first way to get more out of your team's to create more creativity is to just, if you can, put even put fewer people on sprints or do something so it just dials back a little bit to give people a little more time to do other stuff, and to have what we always tried to do at Google Ventures was to have these make time sort of weeks, a week where you have time to create something. And it doesn't mean you don't have a day or two of meetings, but that week it's a sprint, or it's effectively there's a big block of time available to me to dive into a writing project, or for us to dive into working on the website or whatever it might be. And that allowed us to feel like a different mode. So I think part of what happens is just when you're in the same mode all the time, no matter what that mode is, then you're going to get run dry on inspiration.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, so at Google Ventures, how did that work? Was there a roster, Jake is on week, off week, on week, off week. And was there was it explicit, or was it rather, I don't want to do a sprint this week?
It was just, I don't want to do sprint this week. I just said that every week. I was like, you guys do it. I'm just going to sit back here and take credit for it.
I wrote the book, boys.
I wrote the book. You do the sprint. I wrote the book. Well, we had, practically how we did it actually, and I don't think this really makes sense for many teams necessarily, but John and I were really into, John Zaratsky, we were in the same office. We were really into sprints, and we would just, most often the two of us would do a sprint together. And then whenever we could, we would bring in, we'd work with Braden, we would work with Daniel, we would work with Michael, Kristen, the other folks on our team. But it was largely we wanted to do sprints as much as we could. And again, kind of starting to become aware of, there's a certain point where it's diminishing returns. And then those other folks were also doing other things. They were doing sprints, but they were also Daniel was also advising a bunch of companies on their brand and their product and coaching founders. And the same with Braden. And he was, helping teams with some deeper projects as well. So I don't know how to translate that to an agency, except that some people are more into sprints than other people and have more of an interest in just kind of doing it over and over again. And that does help.
I think that it brings up an interesting topic that came up a lot at the bootcamp. So at the after party, I spoke to a lot of people who were really interested in learning more about what we're doing, and they really wanted to tell us also what the problems in their companies were and what the product team level problems they had. And a very, very, very common problem they had, now that I think about it, is similar to what you just said, is that these people, these designers and these product people, are stuck in a perpetual, not design sprint, but they're perpetually stuck in these, 2-week agile sprints, producing assets and solving reactive problems that are coming from who they don't even know where these tasks are coming from, but they're just constantly in reactionary mode, and they have a very difficult time making any time to create something new for their products. And this is not just some small companies. This is also the larger ones who we all know they're having trouble with this too. And they were excited about the idea that sprints could be a way to break this monotony and move them from a reactionary state to a state of taking action, which is ironically the opposite problem that we have in AJ&Smart. But I think that that's a common, it seems to be a huge issue in almost every company I've worked with over the last 5 years, 6 years, where they're saying, you know what, this is all great, all these processes are great, all these workshops are great, but I have to fix this thing that's after being sent, or I need to make this random button that now I need to make because a new device came out. How do you think that, have you seen any great examples of companies balancing this reactive state, which of course you have to be in, right? You have to make stuff with this non-reactive state. Just from my perspective, the best example are companies who've adopted, at least what we kind of recommend them to do, is doing a 2-week back-to-back sprint once every quarter, just booking it in advance so that they're automatically out of this reactive state, and doing that with different teams. It tends to make the teams feel like they're in a little bit more control, but of course, that's something that a lot of companies are not going to do.
There's like a crazy engine sound in the background. Sorry, I just looked out. I was wondering if there was like a helicopter landing in on the buildings here. But I was listening to you.
It's okay, John. Matt. It's all right.
Could you just start over with that question?
Something about companies. I don't know.
No, but yeah, I think. Well, first of all, I think there's kind of a funny thing because we were talking in one of the previous episodes about how some people. Haters, I call them just haters, but they hate on the sprint process because they say, "Oh, you're just speeding. You can't speed up design. You can't speed it up." And I think that it's funny because in many companies, companies are building great products even, but in many companies, that like idealistic design process that those folks who want to diss us are talking about is not happening.
No,
it is just constant reaction mode.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of this like idealized thing of like, oh, well, don't do that because what you should be doing is this sprawling like quest for creativity and design and perfection. And like, I'm sorry, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Or if, and when it does, it has its own problems. But I think that what you're describing about like this sort of routine, I think that we've seen a lot of where a company starts off a quarter, say, with a sprint or 2 sprints ideally, and they've reserved 2 weeks at the start of every quarter to do that first sprint, find out where all of the holes are, find out where the gap is between what they have in mind and what people are not understanding, and which they won't in the first test usually, and then they fix it in the second week, and usually you see that dramatic improvement in kind of product market fit for the feature, whatever, as people learn like, okay, that's where customers' heads are at. That's where we sort of started to put our prototype together. We're going to make it better, and usually the second week they nail it. And then teams who have a really good execution mode for the rest of, let's say, the quarter. That's like a really good cycle because then it gives you. I just touched the microphone. So
that's okay. I hate you.
But that's a really good cycle because then the team is gonna, if they can execute well, they're gonna have confidence in a big thing, and having confidence in a big thing and having enough of a head of steam to go do that big thing and take a while executing it is healthy. I think actually. People say like waterfall process and everybody's like, oh God, that sucks. What an old fashioned, terrible way to build things. Yeah. But it's not. Yeah. It's not bad, actually. What's bad about it is if you do a waterfall process and you don't have a good idea, and you're operating on a hunch that's not good, or your plan is not good, because it takes a long time. And once you're in that tunnel, right? But because people are like, oh, well, we can't have a spec. We just have to go fast. We got to move fast and break things. And the trouble with that is you do get in this reactionary mode when there's always a sense that things can change, things can churn at any time. It's hard to get to a high quality product. So I think you're best off if you start off with the sprints, you get some validation of your hunch, or you find out your hunch was wrong, you change directions. But once you have confidence then you go into a longer process. And then hopefully you have time during that longer process, because you know what shape the product needs to have. You have the time to dig in deep and do that more thorough, thinking, get the quality there, hopefully get inspired by things and do your best craftsmanship, do great work. And, that's the products that most of us love. They're products that people spend some time with each cycle of work that they do. They spend some time doing it. And it's not all a mad dash. And it's not also all like a hunch and then just like marching on a hunch for years. But it's a combination of the two.
Great. I think that was a stunning answer. And I think we can close the topic there. And maybe, we're already after reaching 46 minutes. So I think we can actually end the podcast maybe with a recommendation from both of us of something interesting. And I'm just going to go for it. You'll see what I'm talking about once I do it. So 3 episodes ago, in episode 1, we spoke about a book called The Power of Moments. And we mentioned that it was a great secret weapon for designers, because it's not a book necessarily that designers are going to be reading, but the principles in it are amazing principles to use for building products. This getting in the habit of engineering moments for customers. Now, this week, I have another book. I have another secret weapon, and it came out of nowhere. It just popped out of nowhere, and I had it on my shelf. Honestly, I had it on my shelf for about 8 months, and I never even thought to read it. I don't even know where I got it from. I don't know who recommended it to me, so sorry, whoever recommended this to me. But it's called...
Let's say it was me.
It was you, Jay. Sure, even though you didn't even know what it was.
I haven't read it, but let's see.
So it's called Radical Candor. I don't know how this is going to be placed. Anyway, whether you're on YouTube or not, it's called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And Kim Scott was a manager at Google. She thought management at Apple. She thought at Twitter. And basically, she's written the best book I've ever read on, I know this doesn't sound interesting, but it's management. It's about managing teams and giving good feedback. The core of it is about being able to give good, candid, straight feedback without necessarily insulting people, but also without cherry coating everything in a way that people won't understand what you actually want. And I think, as someone who manages and runs design teams all the time, something that can be pretty difficult, especially when you're dealing with design, which can be seen as subjective. I think it's been pretty difficult for me to be able to give design advice, even after 9 years of being a designer. I tend to either lean a little bit too much on the nice side, especially if I find the person scary who I'm talking to. Or I maybe go overboard and get a little bit insulting, which obviously doesn't work either, right? It's that neither of these approaches work. And this book, I'm always recommending books after reading the first 30 pages. But this book, I'm around halfway through it, and it's going into everything from just how to give great feedback meetings, how to help people within companies grow and get better at what they're doing, or people maybe who don't want to grow and want to just get better at exactly what they're doing right now, and just how to identify different types of people on teams. It's just really, really, really amazing. And I think that if I had read this 10 years ago, before I was managing product teams, I would have been able to receive feedback better than I did back then, and use that feedback in a way that actually was more constructive. So I think that this book, Radical Candor, if you are in any way involved in products where you have to speak to people and take or give feedback, even just reading the first 50 pages of this book, it's gold. It's unbelievably good. I also think the writing style is amazing. It's one of the nicest written books I've read in a long time. It's like cutting with a hot knife through butter. I read the first half of it in the first sitting, and I was completely blown away by it. So, Radical Candor by Kim Scott, huge recommendation. Another secret weapon.
You've been talking about this all the time to me.
My God.
You were texting me about it, emailing me about it. I don't know.
Smoke
you were
signals.
Probably Instagramming about it. Smoke signal, everything, every means of communication. And so I downloaded the sample on the Kindle, and I started reading it, and the same impression I don't even manage people. And in fact, throughout my career, I've actively tried to avoid, every time I got into a management situation, I tried to quit as quickly as possible because it's horrible to manage people. But I think there's actually good lessons in there for anyone.
Yeah.
Based on, I should say, reading the first 10 pages so far since you told me about it. But it is really good. And the writing is really, really clear, clean, nice, keeps you going, at least in the beginning. And you really sprung this on me, this idea of having a product, a secret weapon to share with people. I was frantically looking around my desk for something to grab while you were talking. Yeah. Have you guys heard of Stranger Things? But then you gave me an idea while you were talking, which was a secret weapon for everybody. What I did not know when I set out to write a nonfiction book. So Sprint is a nonfiction book.
Oh,
it's a
Sprint.
business book.
I haven't heard of that one. You're selling it, right? Are you selling that book?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I just so happen to have one right here. Look at that. Yeah. What a coincidence.
I heard it's a really bad book though, like badly written.
But if you, it's a piece. It is a piece. But I'll tell you something that I did not know that many people may know, but I didn't know. When I set out we started writing Sprint, started talking to our agent about it. If you're writing a fiction book, a novel, then you got to write the whole thing, and then you try to sell the whole thing to a publisher based on if the whole thing is good or not. But that's not the way it works with nonfiction. If you pick up a business book like this, we didn't write the whole thing before the publisher agreed to publish it. We wrote a proposal for the book, and what the proposal usually is roughly the introduction to the book, and then kind of a business plan for who the target audience is, how we might market the book, and also an outline of the book in detail. Like in the first chapter, this will happen, and it talks a little bit about it. Now, if you pick up almost any business book, you will find that people have done what we did, quite honestly. It's just to reuse the proposal in the beginning of the book, because you don't want to have to rewrite all. I mean, you already wrote 20, 30 good pages, and you put everything you could into that because you're trying at that point to get a publisher to buy the book. So at that point, you're thinking about, how can I explain this idea as clearly as possible? How can I make it intriguing? And I want to kind of like give away enough of the content so that it's believable and credible. And then by the time you're done with that, you look at that and you're like, well, hey, that's the way we should start the book. So here's the secret for readers. If you pick up a nonfiction book and you find that the beginning is great, it's telling you this idea, you feel like you're getting it, things are clicking, this writing is great. And if you've ever had this experience, and I'm not saying this about Radical Candor because I haven't read it yet. It's probably great all the way through. It's probably great all the way through, but many business books are not great all the way through, and they're best in the introduction. It's okay to stop after the introduction. If you feel like you got through the introduction and you got a good idea, you may have already gotten 90% of the value from the whole book. That's not true of Sprint.
Absolutely not. Well, you cheated with Sprint,
amazing,
though, because it's got the exercises spread throughout the entire book, so you kind of cheated a little bit.
It does, but I will tell you the truth. If you read the introduction and the first story about Savioke, you would know what a sprint is.
Yeah.
Right. You'd have the idea, and it wouldn't be, you wouldn't know how to do it. And obviously that's the case with most books. There's more in the rest of them, but they have to have the whole idea in the beginning because that's the way they write the proposal. So it's a trick. It is a trick for readers. Read the beginning.
That's so weird that you said this, by the way, because in my notes, my next thing that I wanted to say is that in episode 1, I spoke about the power of moments, and I hadn't finished it yet, and I was telling you how amazing it was, and I was about halfway through the book, and my opinion now, based on that, and also reading a couple of other books over the last few years, is that it's exactly that. Honestly, if you feel like you've gotten enough out of the first half of it or the first hour of reading, then don't feel bad that you didn't finish it. And I think that's something that I have a really bad habit of, is that I feel guilty for not finishing books, really, really guilty. And I'm like, I build them up and I'm like, oh no, I didn't finish it. But with really now that you say that as well, it's kind of confirmed my thought that, you know what, for example, The Artist's Way, this book here, I know I just wanted that for the intro because I wanted to learn about the morning pages, and I actually don't want to do any of the exercises, which are 80% of the book. I'm not going to do any of those other with the weekly program that they offer. But just reading the intro to this book was already more than enough value for me. However, this book, Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko Willink, I think I'm actually going to read this the whole way through because the text is huge.
Each page has like 10 words on it.
Yeah, exactly. The text is so huge. It's amazing. It's like an amazing, like if you're on YouTube, just like look at this. It's so aggressive. It's really.
It looks like when you used to get like a CD or record, but really a CD because you would have a long booklet, and like that looks like it would be the liner notes, like the lyrics to an Alice in Chains album.
That's funny that you say that because Kyle, also one of my colleagues at AJ&Smart, earlier when I showed it to him, he was like, that looks like a Linkin Park or new metal CD cover. Yeah, it does look like that. But I think I'm going to finish that book. I think I'm also going to finish Radical Candor, but I would be amazed if it continues to give me the amount of insight that I've gotten already in the first 1 hour. I literally haven't been able to, like, I'm just highlighting everything, dog-earing every single page. Really, really amazing book. Okay, great. So I think that's enough. That's enough podcast.
That is more than enough.
We are on 57 minutes.
Enough.
Yeah, we've got like 57 minutes of podcast. So Jake, where can people find you online if they have questions?
They can find me online at jakeknapp.com and on Twitter at Jake K, at Jakek.
JakeKnapp.com is so old school. Like here's my website. Here's my GeoCities website.
Visit me on the World Wide Web at geocities.com
/ the internet. Great, perfect.
My bulletin board. You can dial into my bulletin board.
Oh my God, that would be so cool. We should have a bulletin board. I mean, I'm going to have to make I bought the domain name Product Breakfast Club podcast. So we have it. Now I have to.
Product Breakfast Club podcast?
I think it's just productbreakfastclub.com.
I was going to say, because if productbreakfastclub.com was taken, that's really
no, it's not.
Would have been.
But what I have to do is I need to make a website. So actually, every podcast is sponsored by Squarespace. This podcast should. Like, I'm going to use Squarespace for it, so that's just you need to host.
Do you think they will sponsor us if we use it?
I think they need people to listen to the podcast to sponsor it. I think that's how
that's probably
do it.
Why people would want to sponsor it if people were listening.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That does make sense actually.
Should I just do
why they?
I could just do a sponsorship ad now. Like one of those. Use the code 402 Johnny Boy on. Okay, great. So
use that on Squarespace and good luck.
See what happens. Just see what happens. So you can find me at J Ice Cream. It's J and then the word ice cream on Instagram mainly. It's not like I'm not posting professional design related stuff on there, but you can definitely catch me there. And also on Twitter. I don't really like Twitter that much. It's like the cool thing about Instagram is that you don't feel sad after using it. Like with Twitter, you open it up.
This sounds like a good topic for another episode.
Yeah, it is.
We should talk about that.
I'm just going to give it a bullet point. So Instagram, you open it up. What you see is pictures of nice food, pictures of nice landscapes, pictures of nice looking people. None of those are from my Instagram account, by the way. And it's like you just don't feel like you're not like, oh my God, the world is falling apart. And you go onto Twitter or you go onto Facebook and it's like, everyone's dead. And it's like, come on. I just want to have a look at, and it's always so negative and everyone's so angry and everyone's outraged about everything. And it's like, I want to go back to Instagram and just curl up in a corner and look at some pictures of waffles. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I have never heard that sort of take on social media.
Yeah.
And I feel like myself, I allow myself to do one thing because otherwise I would just get way too into it. And I limit the amount of time I spend even on Twitter because I'd get way too into it. But maybe, I mean, it would be kind of funny to do. I could try doing Instagram for a while and we could see, maybe I'll start being more cheerful on the podcast.
Instagram's great. And the stories as well, being able, like I do the daily updates, the stories. It's basically like having a vlog, but you have like zero stress to make it good. So it's like today my vlog was like, I don't know, me getting these books. That's it. Like, it's not. And people comment on and people talk and there's like a dialogue. And when you post something on Twitter, especially when I write one of my articles, Jesus, I get so, it's just like a lot of rage, right? People get outraged or people, and it's just like this vibe of, okay, oh yeah, I'm on Twitter. Oh, there's something there. I need to get angry about it quick so that other people see that I'm a good person. Whereas on Instagram, it's just like, I just click like on this, picture of someone's extremely ripped abs. You would really question me if you saw my Instagram because I'm really into
now I'm
fitness.
starting to wonder. The more you talk about it, the less
I follow a lot of fitness accounts because I want to look at these pictures and say, damn it, I really should go to the gym. But every so often I'm kind of sitting there looking at Instagram and my wife will just look over and I'm like, just ignore these oiled up men. I want to be them. I want to be these men. Doesn't help.
Well, that I think, and now we're kind of veering into more than a bullet point about
men.
That is the downside of Instagram, I think, is that it's more perfect life crafting.
Oh, but that's so much better
than Twitter.
I
guess, but then it's also like, oh, why isn't my life so perfect? Whereas on Twitter, you're like, yeah, everything sucks.
I think that you need a balance.
I think it's time. I think we have to do a Freaky Friday experiment where you do Twitter for an amount of time, I do Instagram for an amount of time, and then we compare notes about what happened when we crossed the streams.
No.
Future episode of the Product Breakfast Club.
Can't wait for that one, Jake. It was lovely talking to you, and talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Product Breakfast Club with Jake Knapp and Jonathan Courtney. You can check out past episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. We have many more great discussions coming soon. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and leave us a review. The one thing that would really blow our minds is a 5-star review. Wow, that would be really nice. This podcast is produced by Kit, Brittany, and Patrick for AJ&Smart.